Hello, the name's BrianTheBrain, and whoa! Phew, that was close. Anyways, as I was Burnout Legends, the hit racing game released in 2005 on the PSP, the uber popular handheld that was the direct competitor to the DS, is the 5th entry in the series. Hot off the heels of the highly regarded Burnout 3 from the previous year, the game is more or less a port of that game for the handheld that adds in content from Burnout 1 and 2 as well. Nowadays, people don't really talk much about the PSP, and would rather ham it up about how the DS has the game where you can go inside Bowser's stomach, despite the killer marketing the PSP had. I mean, who can forget?
I can't! I'm playing Nut! But there's Portable Nut! What?
Absolutely iconic. By proxy of the fact that people don't look back on the PSP as much as the DS, they also don't really talk about this game much at all. Burnout 3 is the game that people look back on when reminiscing on this franchise when it was still alive and when Criterion weren't sent to the Need for Speed mines, in which I can't really blame them. Burnout 3 is one of the best racing games ever made. Hell, it may even be the best to some. That's made evident by how absolutely addicting the game is, racking up takedown streaks like it's no one's business, chaining together trips to accumulate boosts and to master the tracks, how fluid the controls are, and from how awesome the crash mode is. Plus, the takedowns themselves can look absolutely goofy at times in a way that further adds to the fun factor. Burnout Legends is pretty much the same vein as Burnout 3, so why don't people talk about it as much? Especially considering the fact that the game sold well enough to get the greatest hits level for the system. You'd think that people would talk about this game more, right? No, there's almost no videos on this game on YouTube besides Let's Plays and normal gameplay. And it doesn't help that most people played the DS version, and the DS version is... It's a downright shame too, because this game is awesome! It's Burnout 3, but even better in my opinion. I think a lot of that comes down to the handling physics, which are a little more responsive than 3's, which were already responsive, the amount of content that's available to you, the more linear campaign that feels more contained, and the crash mode being more fast paced. I also love being able to drive around the maps of Burnout 1 and 2 with the physics of 3. It feels so odd, but I love that they added them in to show the contrast between the two formulas. The series has always been known for its arcade style racing, with an emphasis on being like those drivers in those terrible driving compilations. And Legends is the ultimate culmination of it all. It doesn't just feel like a port of Burnout 3, it feels like a celebration of the series until that point, the Sonic generations of Burnout if you will. Pretty much everything about this game is amazing, minus the absence of DJ Striker. Rest in peace my sweet radio channel host. DJ Striker did add a lot more character to 3, and I would have appreciated if they kept him in for Legends, but I can understand why due to the storage limitations of the UMD, since even a dual-layer UMD would not be able to contain the awesomeness of DJ Striker.
You are chilling with Striker. What up, yo? Okay, sorry about that, but I had to say it once, right?
It's sad that he was taken out of the game, but despite that, I would still say that this game is the best one in the series. Yes, even better than Burnout 3. Please don't wish me Burnout fans. And honestly, my favorite racing game of all time. This game is absolutely incredible, and I will be talking in depth on why I think so, and make comparisons to Burnout 3 throughout to further my points. I have a lot to say about this game, so buckle up. It's gonna be one hell of a bumpy ride, full of boosts, drifts, and traffic violations. Burnout Legends, like pretty much any PSP game, was made with the handheld format in mind. The campaign is a lot more linear in its progression than Burnout 3, which was set up where each geological area, those being the United States, Europe, and Asia, had their own set of races you needed to do in order to unlock the Grand Prix. Burnout Legends is similar in the way that it uses different countries for races, but the countries themselves aren't the main segments of the World Tour anymore. Now, each segment is determined by the class of the cars, which go in order from Compact, Muscle, Coupe, Sports, and Super. Each campaign is about an hour long, and all of them have their own set of races you need to do, with there being a minimum requirement of races you need to complete in order to unlock the Grand Prix for that class, and upon completion, you get the next class. Most of the races unlock a new car or track or both when you complete them, so there's always something to gain from each race, even if it's just from the extra experience. The way this game goes about the world tour is honestly a much better way than how Burnout 3 handled it, since I've always believed that the gameplay of Burnout lends itself well to a handheld format, even more so than a console format. You can do a few of these races at work, or wherever, and then pop out when you're done. The linearity of this game's progression is honestly one of its greatest strengths, since you know exactly what you're getting into when you keep coming back to it. And come back to it you will, because it's a big part of why this game is so addicting. I beat the entire World Tour mode in about 5 hours for this video, and never once did I take a break to go do something else. That's actually a rather quick time for World Tour completion as well, because I don't mean to brag, but I'm pretty good at this game, and I didn't really need to restart most of the races because of that. It's part of why it was so fun all the way through that I didn't even need to do anything else. It would be foolish to be a productive member of society when I can make funny cargo commit vehicle manslaughter. Another part of why it was so addicting for me is to see how each car I took down would react. It was always a bummer when the car would kind of just move a bit after they crash, but it was always a laugh and a half whenever they would go flying off into the sunset. I absolutely love the physics of this game, and it's why I always look forward to the road rage missions throughout the World Tour mode. There are other kinds of races besides the normal race mode and the road rage mode. You have Eliminator, which is basically just a normal race, but last place is eliminated every lap. There's Face Off, where you race against one other car, and you get the car if you win the race. There's Burning Lap, which is basically a time trial event where you have to beat the race in a certain amount of time. There's the Pursuit mode that makes this return from Burnout 2, where you have to take down a racer who commits pretty much every on-the-road crime in the book. And there's a cool trick to these that's pretty easy to do. You can purposefully crash into another car, and aftertouch take down the racer, which is a one-shot hit no matter what, and it makes these missions a lot easier and quicker. Last but not least, there's the crash events. You don't really need to do these in order to get to the Grand Prix, but why would you not want to do the crash events? It's part of why people play these games to begin with. It's pretty similar to the crash mode in Burnout 3, but they took out the multiplier pickups, so to compensate, they made the score requirements lower. There's also no helicopter view after the crash is done, which is a bit sad, but it does make the events feel more fast paced than the ones in 3, so I don't really mind. In my opinion, it's due to the variety, the linearity, and the faster pace of this campaign mode that is my favorite in the series. It's literally perfect. I have nothing bad to say about it whatsoever. When the campaign is all said and done though, what else can you do in this game? Well, just play more of it, duh. You can do normal races in the game as well, in the form of the single event mode. In case you either just want to play a few races, already beat the campaign, or just have nothing better to do like me, you can play any of the game's modes that were shown in the World Tour mode on your own. There's also another mode that's not in the World Tour mode called Time Attack, and it's just your standard time trial mode in pretty much any other racing game. This is definitely what the game was meant for, which is to experience the fast pace, high stakes, no holds barred thrills of the Burnout 3 formula, but on the go where you can be laughed at for playing the PSP in public in 2024. I think this would be a good time to address a few things about this game that you probably noticed throughout the course of this video so far. First off, you're probably wondering why this gameplay looks so crisp and smooth in comparison to the normal Burnout Legends you're probably accustomed to if you played the game before on the actual PSP, and I'm glad you asked. It's because of the fact that through the power of PPSSPP, a PSP emulator for computers and phones, you can upscale the game's internal resolution to make it look a lot better. It does show some of the imperfections of the game's visuals that were created for optimization reasons, such as the pop-in of the environment and the low poly versions of the cars that you can only see from far away, but I think the extra visual fidelity more than makes up for it. The game, even on original hardware, looks amazing for a PSP game. It looks almost exactly like Burnout 3, just cut down a few pegs with a decrease in resolution and texture quality. But you can't really tell all that much on the original hardware. You can also use the emulator's cheat menu to increase the game's frame rate to 60, as it was 30 on the original hardware. Even with that 30 FPS cap, I would still say this game is better than Burnout 3, but without it, it's no contest in my opinion. This is the definitive Burnout game. Another thing I want to touch on is the soundtrack. This game, much like 3 and Revenge, uses only licensed music, so while I would love to use it in this video and show you guys more of some of the tracks in the game, I'm afraid that YouTube will kill me if I were to do so. The soundtrack to this game is banging though, as in pretty much every track in the game is a banger. There are less tracks compared to Burnout 3, also due to the the storage limitations of the UMDs, but I actually prefer pretty much every track in this game when comparing it to 3, which also has an incredible soundtrack, mind you. As I was playing through this game, the only game in my head that I was thinking about was Red Flag by Billy Talent on repeat, as if I had become the driver in the game myself, committing all of these road violations for the sake of a dopamine boost. In saying all of that, it's all exactly the reason why this game is so good to begin with. You have so much choice with this game, whether you just want to play through the campaign, if you just want to play some single races, or if you want to indulge in the game's online mode, well, when you can still play it, that is. It's all up to you, and they really didn't need to go this hard with a handheld version of Burnout 3. It could have just been Burnout 3, but just the racing, it would still be a blast to play. But they put in so much more effort than they really needed to just for this game. What's the point in all of this though? After everything I've just said about this game, why do I revere it as highly as I do? How does it truly compare to the other games in the series? Why am I talking about this game that almost no one talks about anymore on the almost equally talked about PSP? Those are very good questions, and I will address all of them right now. I've talked a good amount about how I think about Legends in comparison to 3 and why I consider it to be better than 3, but is there anything any of the other games do better than Legends? Well, there is one comparison that I would like to make in that regard, and it's with Burnout 2. Burnout 2, while not as over the top and crazy as the games after it, honestly still has the best driving controls in the entire series. The later games have more of a focus on the vehicle or combat that Burnout 3 introduced, and it would be the main formula for the series going forward, but 1 and 2 are much closer to the roots as arcade-style racers with dangerous driving more so as a gimmick and not the main point of the game. The first game did this pretty well, but admittedly, it is pretty janky nowadays, and it hasn't held up the best. But Burnout 2 does what Burnout 1 did, and massively improved upon it. I actually view Burnout 2 as an equal to Burnout 3 in its own different way, just due to how good it is as a racer, and not a vehicle combat game with racing in it. The controls are the most fluid and snappy in the entire series, and cars feel more like actual cars. It lends itself so well to the arcade style formula of this era of the franchise that it holds itself up to the same standard of 3 in my opinion. I've made it pretty clear that I prefer Legends over 3 of course, but I've also pointed out that Legends still feels more like 3 when it comes to the overall handling of your car and the physics. By proxy, I still consider Burnout 2 to have better handling and physics than Legends, and consider it to be better as a racing game. I play Burnout 2 if I want more of a traditional arcade racing game, and I play Legends if I want the chaotic action of the series post 3, and I play Burnout 3 if I want Diet Legends. I still do think Legends is a better overall game in comparison to 2, but 2 is also up there for sure. In the same year that Legends came out, we would also get Burnout Revenge, which is also basically another Burnout 3, but with the addition of being rewarded for your crimes against humanity with the inclusion of traffic checking. Some people will talk about whether or not 3 is better than Revenge or Revenge is better than 3, but personally I still prefer 3 over Revenge. Revenge just made the formula too easy, and it rewards you by staying on the right side of the road with the traffic check-in, which beats the entire purpose of Burnout's existence as a whole. It's still really fun to take down just like in Legends, but the actual takedown physics aren't as wacky as in Legends, and that also takes it down a few notches for me when comparing it to Legends. It's still a great game for sure, but I'd rather play 2, 3, or Legends over it any day of the week. In comparing Legends to the other games in the series, it would also be weird to not also address the other Burnout game that came out for the PSP, that being Burnout Dominator. I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but personally, I find Burnout Dominator to be kind of stinky. That game went back to the more traditional boosting in the first 2 games, and I really don't think it lends itself well to its style of gameplay, which is pretty similar to Legends in its gameplay, so also within the Burnout 3 formula. It hinders the game due to the fact that the formula is supposed to be more fast paced than the first 2 games, so the pacing of those with the gameplay of the later games does not go well together at all. Honestly, I'd rather play the original Burnout over Dominator because of this. If you want Burnout on the go, please play Legends instead of Dominator. You'll thank me later. Now, how does Burnout Paradise compare to Legends? Well, Paradise takes quite the detour from the normal gameplay of the games before it, opting for more of an open world street racing approach, much like Need for Speed Most Wanted. It actually feels more like a predecessor to the Need for Speed games Criterion would make after this game in a way. It doesn't really feel much like a Burnout game at all. There's still elements of dangerous driving of course, but that more so comes from the fact that street racing is inherently dangerous, not because of the fact that it's a Burnout game. In saying that, I just don't find the game very fun because of the lack of burnout elements. It drags on for too long, and the handling is not as snappy as the games before it, as well as the fact that the cars don't really have that much weight to them anymore either is all part of why I much prefer Legends over Paradise. I think I've made it pretty clear by now when it comes to how I view Legends in comparison to the other games, and why I personally think it's the pinnacle of the series, because it does everything Burnout did right with 3, and improves upon it. It's the best pure dump fun game I've ever played, and one of the most addicting I've played as well. That still leaves the other question unanswered though, which is why I decided to talk about this game specifically out of any of the other Burnout games. Well, besides me already saying that it's my personal favorite, I want more people to either re-experience this game or play it for the first time, especially if they've played any Burnout game before. It's also because I want more people to see just how awesome the PSP was. No, this hasn't shifted into a PSP appreciation video, but I simply just want to point out how well the system works for Burnout Legends. I don't think this game would have worked as well if it came out on console like most of the other Burnout games, because its gameplay setup lends itself incredibly well to a handheld form factor, and what other handheld at the time could have handled Burnout as well as the PSP? The PSP had a ton of other racing games, and it's honestly its greatest quality besides the amount of fighting games it got. It was able to play near PS2 levels of games, all with a battery life of usually around 3 to 5 hours, all to go. It was just the perfect handheld to house a Burnout game at the time, since the only other choice was the DS, and we already saw how poorly that turned out. If the game was released only on consoles, I would honestly say it's on the same level as Burnout 3, but it's because that it's portable that I prefer over that game. I actually didn't even grow up with the system either. I was a DS kid, and only had experiences with the handheld whenever I would see someone at school play with it. And sometimes I wish I had a PSP over a DS for games like this. Not knocking the DS though, of course. That system also had a lot of incredible games, but I feel as though I would have vibed more with the PSP considering the kinds of games I was into. I had first played the game on an actual PSP around the time 2020 struck, and it was my first overall experience with the Burnout series. I'm sure that there's probably some bias hidden in there somewhere because of that, but I also played an equal amount of Burnout 3 afterwards, so I'd like to think that I'm being pretty fair here. I fell in love with both though, and also fell in love with Burnout 2 when I played that game on the original Xbox. I say all of this so you know where I'm coming from after everything I have just said, and from where my perspective was as someone who had gotten into the series not too long ago. I hope that me talking about this game in such a positive light made you inspired to play it yourself, either for the first time like I had before, or again as someone who had played the game all the way back then, because I can guarantee you that you won't regret it. Oh, it seems like my ride is here. Well, thank you guys for your time, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. It's time for me to hit the road. Wait, what are you doing? No, don't crash into that other car. Wait, stop! Wah!